The night everyone celebrates your loss may be the night destiny quietly learns your name. The great hall of Silver Hollow blazed with crystal chandeliers and moonstone lanterns, their silver glow spilling across polished marble floors as noble wolves from every corner of the Northern Territories gathered for the most anticipated union of the year. Music drifted through the vaulted ceiling while laughter echoed beneath banners embroidered with ancient crests. Yet Emily Carter felt as invisible as the shadow beneath her own feet. Beside her, her identical twin sister, Olivia Carter, stood wrapped in shimmering ivory silk that caught every flicker of candlelight. Their faces were nearly identical, their pale skin equally luminous, their blue eyes equally bright, yet no one looked at Emily twice. Olivia carried herself with effortless confidence, accepting compliments with graceful smiles while their parents basked in the admiration surrounding their chosen daughter. Tonight was supposed to secure the Carter family's future. A powerful alpha lord had claimed Olivia's hand, not for affection but for influence, territory, and political advantage. Everyone called it a perfect match. Emily simply called it inevitable. She had learned years ago that some people entered a room to be seen while others entered only to make someone else shine brighter. "Stand behind your sister," her mother whispered without looking at her. "Smile if anyone notices you." Emily obeyed without protest, smoothing the simple blue gown she had sewn herself. It lacked expensive embroidery, but every careful stitch reminded her of quiet evenings spent creating something beautiful without expecting praise. Across the ballroom, nobles exchanged stories about the coming alliance, already speaking as though Olivia's future had been written by the moon goddess herself. Emily watched her sister laugh, genuinely happy despite knowing the marriage had little to do with love. She wished she could share that certainty. Somewhere beyond the music, the massive doors opened without announcement. A lone traveler stepped inside wearing a dark cloak dusted with miles of road, his face hidden beneath a broad hood. Unlike the jeweled guests filling the hall, he wore no crest and sought no conversation. He paused only long enough to study the room with quiet patience before his gaze settled, not on the celebrated bride, not on the ambitious nobles, but on the forgotten twin standing alone near the balcony. Emily never noticed the stranger. She was too busy helping an elderly servant gather a tray of silver cups that had nearly slipped from trembling hands. She offered the old woman a warm smile, whispered that accidents happen to everyone, and carried the heavy tray herself without expecting thanks. Hidden beneath the shadow of his hood, the mysterious traveler watched every small gesture in complete silence, and for the first time that glittering evening, the faintest hint of a smile touched his lips. The celebration stretched long after the final toast, but Emily slipped away before the orchestra played another song. The cool night air wrapped around her as she stepped beyond the palace gardens, where rows of silver pines whispered beneath the rising moon. Every burst of laughter drifting from the ballroom reminded her that life would continue exactly as everyone expected. Olivia would become the honored bride. The Carter family would finally stand among the most influential houses in the Northern Territories. Emily would remain the quiet daughter whose kindness was appreciated only when it was useful. She followed a narrow stone path leading toward the old forest chapel, the place she visited whenever the world became too loud. The woods greeted her with familiar scents of pine, fresh earth, and wildflowers opening beneath the moonlight. Here titles carried no weight. Trees did not care who ruled kingdoms, and streams never asked who had been chosen or forgotten. Emily knelt beside a shallow creek and dipped her fingers into the cool water, allowing the gentle current to steady her thoughts. She smiled faintly at her own reflection before noticing a faint rustling deeper among the trees. At first she assumed it was a frightened deer, but the sound came again, softer this time, carrying a quiet exhaustion rather than fear. She followed it carefully until she reached a small clearing where a magnificent white wolf rested beneath an ancient oak. The animal was larger than any wolf she had ever seen, yet it remained perfectly still, breathing slowly as though every movement demanded effort. Emily stopped several feet away, lowering her eyes so she would not appear threatening. The wolf watched her with striking silver eyes filled not with anger but with cautious intelligence. She spoke gently, her voice barely louder than the breeze. "You do not have to be afraid. I am not here to take anything from you." The wolf remained silent. Emily slowly removed the small leather water flask from her belt and placed it on a flat stone before taking several careful steps backward. "If you need it, it is yours." She never attempted to touch the animal or force it to trust her. Instead, she sat on a fallen log several yards away, humming the same quiet melody her grandmother had sung throughout her childhood, whenever frightened birds landed outside their window. Minutes passed in peaceful silence. Eventually the great wolf rose with calm dignity, crossed the clearing, and drank from the flask before lifting its head toward Emily once more. Their eyes met for only a heartbeat, yet something impossible seemed to pass between them, as though the moon itself recognized a promise neither of them understood. Emily simply smiled, relieved that the beautiful creature seemed stronger than before. "Take care of yourself," she whispered as she gathered the empty flask. The wolf disappeared soundlessly into the trees without looking back. Hidden high above the clearing, another figure stood upon a rocky ridge overlooking everything that had happened. Dressed in the same weathered cloak from the celebration, the mysterious traveler watched Emily leave with quiet admiration. His trusted captain stepped from the shadows and lowered his voice. "Your Majesty, the council has been searching everywhere for you." The cloaked man never took his eyes from the forest path where Emily had vanished. "Let them wait," he answered calmly. "Tonight I found the only person worth searching for." The first light of dawn painted Silver Hollow in shades of gold, but the palace carried a different kind of brightness, one born from ambition rather than sunrise. Servants hurried through marble corridors carrying embroidered banners, fresh flowers, and polished silver as every noble family prepared for the official signing of Olivia Carter's engagement alliance. Emily woke before everyone else, as she always did, quietly helping the kitchen staff arrange breakfast while avoiding the conversations already celebrating her sister's future. Every smile directed toward Olivia seemed to erase Emily a little more, yet she carried each tray with the same gentle care she had shown the elderly servant the night before. Kindness had never depended on whether anyone noticed. Across the palace, the mysterious traveler stood inside a private chamber overlooking the eastern gardens. The hood that had hidden his face now rested upon a carved chair, revealing strong features framed by dark hair and calm silver eyes that reflected the morning sky. His royal captain waited respectfully beside the window while several council members gathered around an enormous map spread across a polished oak table. One advisor cleared his throat carefully. "Your Majesty, the alliance ceremony begins within 2 hours. Every noble house expects your blessing before the contracts are sealed." King Alexander Blackwood remained silent for several moments before asking a question that surprised everyone in the room. "Tell me about the Carter family. Not their titles. Tell me who they become when no one important is watching." The advisors exchanged uncertain glances. They had prepared reports filled with estates, trade routes, military strength, and political influence. None of them contained the answer their king wanted. Finally, the captain spoke. "The elder twin is admired for her confidence. The younger daughter rarely attends court events. Most records describe her as quiet." Alexander looked toward the forest beyond the palace walls. Quiet people often reveal themselves through actions instead of speeches. The captain remembered what he had witnessed in the woods and nodded without another word. Meanwhile, Emily carried a basket of fresh bread toward the palace courtyard when she noticed a young stable boy struggling to calm a frightened horse unsettled by the growing crowds. The animal pawed nervously against the stone, ears twitching as voices echoed from every direction. Several passing nobles frowned with annoyance, stepping around the scene without slowing their pace. Emily approached carefully, speaking so softly that only the horse seemed to hear her. She rested one gentle hand against its neck, breathing slowly until the nervous animal matched her rhythm. Within moments the horse relaxed, lowering its head with complete trust. The stable boy smiled with visible relief. "Thank you, Miss Carter. I do not know how you always do that." Emily laughed quietly. Sometimes they only need someone willing to be patient. Neither of them realized that from the second-floor balcony above, King Alexander had witnessed the entire moment in silence. He watched the frightened horse settle beneath her calm presence exactly as the great white wolf had settled beside the creek only hours earlier. The pattern was impossible to ignore. Emily never sought admiration. She simply made every place she entered feel a little gentler than she had found it. As the palace bells announced the beginning of the engagement ceremony, Alexander turned away from the balcony with quiet certainty. The council believed today would strengthen a political alliance. Only the Alpha King knew that before another sunrise ended, the destiny of the Northern Territories would begin to follow an entirely different path. The Grand Assembly Chamber shimmered beneath towering stained glass windows as nobles filled every polished row, eager to witness the official blessing that would complete Olivia Carter's political engagement. Rich fabrics swept across the marble floor, jeweled necklaces caught the morning light, and conversations flowed with complete confidence that history had already chosen its winners. Emily stood near the back beside several attendants carrying fresh flowers for the ceremony. No one had assigned her a place among the honored guests. She accepted it without complaint, quietly adjusting a bouquet that had begun to wilt from the warmth inside. The crowded hall. Across the room, Olivia looked every bit the future lady of a powerful house, smiling graciously while accepting endless congratulations. Their parents stood proudly beside her, greeting influential families with renewed confidence, as though every sacrifice they had ever made had finally been rewarded. Yet even in the middle of all the celebration, Emily noticed something strange. The royal throne prepared for the Alpha King remained empty. Whispered conversations slowly spread across the chamber as the scheduled hour passed. One noble suggested that the king had been delayed by urgent affairs of state. Another insisted he had changed his route entirely. The uncertainty grew heavier with every passing minute. Behind a pair of carved oak doors, King Alexander stood inside a private council chamber with only his captain and closest advisor present. The polished crown of the Alpha King rested untouched upon a velvet cushion. Alexander instead wore the same dark traveling clothes from the previous evening. His advisor carefully unfolded the alliance documents waiting for his royal seal. If your majesty approves this union, the Eastern Territories will remain stable for decades. Alexander studied the parchment without reaching for the seal. Stability purchased without honesty never lasts. The advisor hesitated before asking, "You are concerned about the Carter family?" Alexander slowly shook his head. "No. I am concerned that everyone inside that hall mistakes ambition for character." Silence settled across the room until the captain finally spoke. "Then you have already made your decision." Alexander looked toward the sunlight pouring through the narrow window. "I made it the moment I saw someone offer kindness when she believed no one important was watching." Back inside the assembly chamber, Emily quietly slipped away from the gathering after noticing an elderly musician struggling to carry a heavy wooden instrument toward the stage. Without interrupting the ceremony preparations, she hurried over and lifted one side of the case, helping him climb the broad staircase one careful step at a time. The grateful musician smiled warmly. "You missed your chance to stand beside your family." Emily answered with the same peaceful expression she always carried. This seemed more important. Neither of them realized that hidden behind the partially open balcony doors above, Alexander had witnessed the exchange from beginning to end. Every report presented by his advisors praised noble bloodlines, wealth, and influence. None of them had mentioned the woman who instinctively placed another person's burden ahead of her own disappointment. As the palace bells echoed across Silver Hollow announcing the arrival of the Alpha King, hundreds of guests straightened with anticipation, believing they were about to witness the final blessing of a political future. Only Alexander knew that before the hour ended, every expectation inside that magnificent hall would quietly begin to unravel. The great doors of the assembly chamber opened with slow, deliberate grace, and every conversation dissolved into silence. Rows of royal guards stepped inside first, their polished silver armor reflecting the morning light as they formed a ceremonial path across the marble floor. Then King Alexander Blackwood entered without haste, his dark formal attire marked only by the ancient crest of the northern crown. He carried no unnecessary display of power because he did not need one. His calm presence alone commanded the attention of every noble in the room. Hundreds of guests lowered their heads in respect while musicians played the royal anthem. Emily followed tradition and bowed quietly with everyone else, never lifting her eyes beyond the polished floor beneath her feet. Olivia stood proudly beside her future political match, convinced that this moment would forever secure her family's place among the highest houses of the kingdom. Alexander acknowledged the gathering with a courteous nod before taking his place near the royal dais. The chief counselor stepped forward holding the alliance documents with obvious satisfaction. "Your Majesty, today the House of Carter joins one of our strongest allied families. Together they will strengthen prosperity throughout the Eastern Territories. Applause spread across the chamber. Alexander accepted the documents but did not immediately read them. Instead, his silver eyes drifted slowly across the hall, studying every face with thoughtful patience. The room grew unexpectedly quiet as his gaze rested briefly on Olivia before moving on without expression. Then his attention found Emily standing several rows behind the honored guests, still holding the empty basket she had forgotten to set aside after helping decorate the hall. She looked surprised simply to be noticed. Alexander remembered the frightened horse lowering its head beneath her gentle touch, the elderly musician smiling with gratitude, the servant she had quietly helped, and the white wolf drinking from the small water flask beside the forest creek. None of those moments had been performed for recognition. They had happened because kindness was simply part of who she was. The counselor cleared his throat, mistaking the silence for hesitation. "Your Majesty, shall I present the official blessing?" Alexander folded the documents closed instead of signing them. A ripple of confusion spread through the gathered nobles. Olivia exchanged uncertain glances with her parents while whispers traveled from one end of the chamber to the other. The Alpha King stepped away from the royal platform, leaving the unsigned alliance upon the table. His measured footsteps echoed across the marble floor as every guest instinctively turned to follow his path. He did not walk toward the noble families seated in the front rows. He did not stop beside the influential lords who eagerly awaited his approval. He continued forward with quiet certainty until only a few yards separated him from the forgotten twin standing near the back of the chamber. Emily looked behind herself, believing he must be approaching someone else. There was no one there. Her heartbeat quickened as Alexander stopped directly before her. For one suspended moment the entire hall seemed to forget how to breathe. The Alpha King offered her a warm, respectful smile that carried none of the distance expected from a ruler. Then, in a voice calm enough to fill every corner of the silent chamber, he said, "Miss Emily Carter, before this day comes to its end, I would like the opportunity to speak with you alone." Every expectation that had filled the palace since sunrise shifted in a single heartbeat, and not one person in the room could explain why the king had just changed the course of the entire celebration. Emily could scarcely believe that the Alpha King was speaking to her. Around her, the silence inside the assembly chamber became almost tangible, broken only by the faint crackle of the ceremonial torches lining the walls. She lowered her eyes respectfully, uncertain whether she had misunderstood his words. "Your Majesty," she answered softly, "if it is your wish, I will gladly listen." Alexander inclined his head with genuine warmth rather than royal distance. "Thank you." It was a simple exchange, yet every noble present sensed that something impossible had just begun. Olivia's smile faded ever so slightly. Her future husband shifted uncomfortably, clearly unsure why the ruler of the Northern Territories had interrupted an important political ceremony to speak with the forgotten twin. Emily's parents exchanged anxious glances, silently wondering whether their younger daughter had somehow violated palace etiquette. The chief counselor stepped forward carefully, determined to restore order. "Your Majesty, the alliance documents are prepared. The guests have traveled many miles for today's signing." Alexander accepted the reminder with calm courtesy, "and they shall witness something far more valuable than another signature." His words echoed through the magnificent hall, leaving the counselors with no reply. He turned back toward Emily. "Would you walk with me?" She hesitated for only a heartbeat before placing the flower basket upon a nearby table. Together they crossed the length of the chamber toward an open terrace overlooking the royal gardens. Hundreds of curious eyes followed every step. Beyond the carved stone arches, the morning breeze carried the fragrance of blooming white roses across the hillside. The sounds of the crowded hall faded behind them until only birdsong and distant fountains filled the peaceful air. Emily folded her hands politely. "I do not understand why your Majesty wished to speak with me." Alexander rested one hand upon the terrace railing, while studying the forest stretching beyond the palace grounds. "Yesterday evening I attended the celebration before revealing who I was." Emily looked up in surprise. "The traveler?" He smiled gently. "Yes. I wanted to see people without the weight of a crown changing their behavior." Her eyes widened as memories returned. The quiet stranger, the elderly servant, the frightened horse. The peaceful white wolf beside the creek. Everything suddenly connected. That wolf, she whispered. Alexander met her gaze. Was me. Emily's breath caught. Not from fear but from astonishment. You trusted a complete stranger, he continued. You helped people who could offer you nothing in return. You comforted a frightened animal when everyone else hurried past. Every report I received praised titles, fortunes, and influence. None of them mentioned the woman whose kindness remained unchanged whether anyone was watching or not. Emily lowered her eyes again, feeling suddenly embarrassed by the praise. I only did what seemed right. Alexander answered without hesitation. That is exactly why I wanted to know you. Behind the terrace doors, whispers swept through the gathering like wind through autumn leaves as nobles strained to glimpse the private conversation. Olivia watched silently, confusion replacing confidence with every passing moment. She had spent years believing influence opened every door, yet the Alpha King had walked past wealth, beauty, and political advantage to speak with the one person no one else had truly seen. As the palace clock marked the next hour, Alexander looked toward the brilliant sky before returning his attention to Emily. Before this day ends, he said quietly, I intend to make a decision that many people will not expect. I only hope you will hear my reasons before you judge them. Emily searched Alexander's face for any sign that this was some elaborate misunderstanding, but the quiet certainty in his silver eyes never wavered. The morning breeze stirred the rose vines climbing the terrace walls, carrying their sweet fragrance between them while the sounds of the crowded assembly remained just beyond the open doors. Your Majesty, she said carefully, I am honored by your kindness, but I am not the woman everyone expected you to notice. Alexander smiled gently. That is precisely why I noticed you. He turned toward the gardens below where palace servants tended flowers with the same care they had shown for generations. When rulers choose only what the world celebrates, they often inherit appearances instead of character. My responsibility is greater than preserving traditions. I must recognize truth when it quietly stands before me. Emily listened without interrupting. She had spent so many years believing she was meant to remain unseen that hearing someone describe her with such respect felt almost unreal. Alexander continued. Yesterday I watched nobles compete for influence. I watched families calculate their future with every conversation. Then I saw you help a servant who feared making a mistake. I watched you calm a frightened horse while everyone else hurried past. I watched you offer water to a white wolf without asking for anything in return because compassion came naturally to you. None of those moments were performed for applause. They revealed who you are. Emily lowered her gaze, feeling warmth rise to her cheeks. I only treated them the way I hoped someone would treat me. Alexander nodded slowly. Exactly. Power can command obedience, but kindness inspires trust. A kingdom survives on both, yet only one of them cannot be forced. Before Emily could answer, the terrace doors opened quietly. The chief counselor stepped outside, clearly uneasy. Your Majesty, the nobles grow impatient. They are asking whether the ceremony will continue. Alexander looked toward the waiting crowd inside the grand hall. Tell them it will continue exactly as it should. The counselor hesitated, sensing there was more behind those words than he understood, but he bowed respectfully and returned inside. Emily glanced through the open doorway, noticing hundreds of curious faces following every movement from across the chamber. Olivia stood near the front with quiet uncertainty replacing the confidence she had carried since sunrise. Their parents whispered anxiously between themselves, unable to understand why the Alpha King continued speaking with the daughter they had always expected to remain in the background. Emily sighed softly. They will think I wanted this attention. Alexander answered with calm conviction. Anyone who truly observed your actions today already knows otherwise. He reached inside his formal coat and removed a small velvet box bearing the royal crest. He did not open it immediately. Instead, he held it thoughtfully in one hand while meeting Emily's eyes once more. There are moments when an entire kingdom changes direction without realizing it. I believe this is one of those moments. Emily looked at the unopened box, then back at the Alpha King, her heart beating faster with every passing second. She still did not know what decision he was about to announce, but deep within her she sensed that when the terrace doors opened again, neither her life nor the future of the Northern Territories would ever be the same. When Alexander and Emily stepped back into the assembly chamber together, every conversation stopped before a single word was spoken. Hundreds of eyes followed them as they crossed the polished marble floor beneath towering crystal chandeliers. The silence felt almost sacred, as though the palace itself was waiting for history to choose its next sentence. The chief counselor straightened the alliance documents once more, forcing a polite smile. "Your Majesty, shall we proceed with the official blessing?" Alexander walked past the prepared table without reaching for the parchment. Instead, he turned to face the gathered nobles. Today was meant to celebrate an alliance built upon influence. I have no objection to honorable alliances, but I cannot place the seal of the Northern Crown upon a decision without first honoring something greater. Murmurs spread through the chamber as every noble exchanged uncertain glances. Olivia stood perfectly still, confusion replacing the confidence she had carried since the festival began. Her future political match lowered his eyes, sensing that events had moved beyond anyone's expectations. Alexander raised the small, velvet box he had carried from the terrace. Every member of the royal council recognized it immediately. It contained the ancient mooncrest ring, a symbol reserved only for the woman the Alpha King personally chose to stand beside him. The chamber fell completely silent. Emily looked at the box with visible surprise. "Your Majesty," she whispered, "I do not believe this belongs anywhere near me." Alexander answered with calm certainty. "It belongs beside the person who reminds a kingdom what true strength looks like." He opened the velvet case, revealing the elegant silver ring that reflected the morning light like a quiet star. Then, before every noble family in attendance, he turned fully toward Emily. "Miss Emily Carter," he said, his voice carrying effortlessly across the magnificent hall. "During the past day I have watched you serve without expectation, comfort without recognition, and choose kindness when no reward was possible. Crowns are often given to those who seek power. I believe they should also honor those who never needed power to become extraordinary." Emily's eyes filled with emotion, not because of the attention surrounding her, but because someone had finally seen the person she had always tried to be. She shook her head gently. "I am only an ordinary woman." Alexander smiled. "That is where you are mistaken. Extraordinary hearts often hide inside ordinary lives." Across the hall, Emily's parents stood speechless. They searched their memories, suddenly recalling countless moments they had overlooked while chasing ambitious dreams for Olivia. Beside them, Olivia lowered her gaze. There was disappointment in her expression, but there was also understanding. She remembered every quiet moment Emily had carried burdens without complaint, every celebration where Emily had happily stood behind her, every opportunity she had accepted while her sister quietly gave way. For the first time, Olivia realized that admiration earned through appearances faded quickly, but respect earned through character remained long after the music ended. She slowly stepped forward and offered Emily a gentle smile. "I should have thanked you years ago," she said softly. "You spent your whole life celebrating my happiness, and I forgot to celebrate yours." Emily embraced her sister without hesitation. The hall watched in complete silence as the two sisters stood together beneath the morning light. And in that simple moment of forgiveness, the Alpha King knew he had chosen not only a remarkable woman but the future heart of an entire kingdom. The morning after the ceremony, Silver Hollow awakened beneath a peaceful sky, yet the entire kingdom already carried whispers of a new beginning. The grand halls that once echoed with discussions of alliances and influence now spoke of compassion, trust, and the unexpected choice made by the Alpha King. Emily stood beside the palace balcony overlooking the endless forests of the Northern Territories, watching sunlight spread across the land she had never imagined calling home. She still found it difficult to believe how quickly everything had changed. Only days earlier, she had been the forgotten twin standing quietly behind her sister. Now, people across the kingdom spoke her name with respect, not because of a title she had received, but because of the kindness she had always carried. Alexander joined her beneath the morning light, no longer the distant ruler hidden behind royal expectations, but the man who had walked through the forest searching for something real. "Are you ready for everything that comes with this?" he asked gently. Emily looked toward the villages beyond the palace walls, where ordinary people began their days without ever knowing how close their kingdom had come to changing forever. "I am still the same person I was yesterday," she replied. "I just want to make sure I never forget that." Alexander smiled. That is exactly why I know you will never lose yourself. Together, they walked through the palace gardens where flowers bloomed beside ancient stone paths. Servants greeted Emily warmly, not because they were required to, but because they remembered the small moments when she had treated them with dignity. The elderly musician she helped offered a grateful smile. The stable boy who once struggled with a frightened horse bowed proudly. Every person she had helped, before anyone knew her importance, now reminded her that her greatest strength had never been hidden behind a crown. It had always been within her. Later that day, Emily visited Olivia in the quiet garden where the two sisters had spent countless childhood afternoons. Their conversation was different now. There was no competition, no comparison, and no need to prove who deserved more. Olivia admitted that she had spent years chasing admiration, because she believed being chosen was the same as being valued. Emily simply held her sister's hand and reminded her that everyone deserved the chance to become better than they were yesterday. As the sun began to set over Silver Hollow, Alexander and Emily stood together beneath the first stars of evening. The kingdom would remember the day the Alpha King changed his path, not because he abandoned tradition, but because he understood something greater. True strength was never measured by how many people followed you. It was measured by how many hearts became brighter because you were there. And beneath the quiet glow of the moon, Emily finally understood that she had never been invisible. Destiny had simply been waiting for the right moment to see her.